All right, let's get this thing rolling. So my name's Nick Mitchell-Mayato, and this is Physical Underground. Honestly, I don't really know what the point of it is, as it kind of feels like trying to stop a runaway train with a feather. But I guess the point is that here in this all-consuming era of digital media, there's an argument that we may have lost something vital in the decline of physical formats as the dominant media. But I don't just want to be one of those people who waxes lyrical, no pun intended, about, poring over record jackets and losing myself in the immersive washes of oil paint on the cover of Iron Maiden's Power Slave or whatever. I don't know, that's just sort of too haplessly nostalgic. And anyway, rather than turn the idea of physical media into some kind of sepia-tinted view of a more wondrous past, I actually think that there's an argument that digital and physical media have the opportunity to sort of sit side by side pretty comfortably, with, sort of convenience and availability cozying up to things like tactility, community, and, deeper engagement with the things that we enjoy. So with that in mind, we're going to kind of use this podcast to talk to people who are still very much engaged in physical media and make it more of a celebration and an opportunity to spread the word to people who might actually give a shit if they could only find out about it. My first guests are three musicians who were all central to the new Weird America movement of the early 2000s and whose influence continues to grow as the years roll by. Ben Chasny of Six Organs of Admittance, Donovan Quinn of Western Extra, and James Toth of Dunza, James and the Giants et al. They've started up this incredible zine about recording music with a focus on unorthodox approaches and experimentation and doing things, the way that you want to do them, rather than the way some YouTuber who went to sound engineering school might tell you they're supposed to be done. The name of the zine is Head Voice, and we spent the best part of an hour talking about what inspired them to do it, what they wanted it to be and what they want it to become, and what their thoughts are on the cut-through potential of a physical magazine in the digital age. We also yacked about some of the people they've interviewed, and everyone told some stories about sound recording that they'd experienced or that they'd heard from other people. It's a great conversation, so let's jump right in. So I've got James Toth, Ben Chasny, and Donovan Quinn here from Head Voice magazine. I love the title of the zine. Who came up with it?
I think that was Donovan.
Yeah. I don't think that there's I don't know how that came about. I know that, like with most titles, we were struggling with it for a while, and that came to me. And then I was like, oh, it works on a few different levels, and so we went with it.
The thing about Donovan is he seems so strange, but everything he says, it might mean two things.
I was going to say there's an obvious double meaning to it, right? So you want to take that?
We actually discussed that a little bit about the connotation of head. Like, I think we kind of were not so sure about that at first because we didn't want it to be necessarily like, oh, this one's for the heads, which sort of is counter to the populism that we were kind of going for with, because the zine is for everybody, but ultimately I think it really works.
Yeah. I mean, the other obvious meaning is that it's the vocal range, the head voice.
Yeah. And then it's also about the voice that's in your head, your interior monologue.
Right.
So, because one of the things we had kind of had a little bit of a motto, which was, you're doing nothing wrong, which is to kind of counteract, the plague of YouTube videos and articles that are all about how you're ruining your mix and your recordings are garbage because you've made this fatal error. And so it's this voice that gets in your mind. Like, you're like, maybe I am destroying my art by not learning these EQ tricks. And, it's this thing that we didn't grow up with. I had my 4-track like most everybody did. And I was like, I'm a genius. This sounds amazing. I played 3 chords. It came back to me in living color, and I can't be stopped. And now you get a lot of, that garbage in your mind that there's a real certain way to do something in art, which doesn't make sense.
Or Donovan, if you don't mind telling the story, remember the great story about when you went into the guitar place and you were talking about recording with the guy?
Oh, and Guitar Center?
Yeah.
Yeah, this was a long time ago. And I went and I would record all the effects wet. So basically, if I had reverb or tremolo or fuzz on something, I would just commit to the effect, is what that means. Like you can't take it off. And so I needed some certain cable to be able to do this because my cable broke. And I went to Guitar Center and I was asking, the guy, and he was like confused. He was like, "What do you need this for?" I don't remember the exact cable. So I explained it to him and he was like, "Oh no, you go through the effects loop and you record it dry. You put on the effect later so you can take it off." And I was like, "That's not how I do it." I had already released like 3 records at this point. And he was like just disturbed by this whole notion and kind of kept pushing. And I was like, till I got upset and was like, I'm already making records. I mean, it's already happening, And again, this is kind of before, long before social media, before I even had access to the internet. And so really, probably in my mind at the time, I was like, this guy doesn't really know what he's talking about. Again, I didn't have that thing, and I was also and continue to be oblivious to, many things. So, well.
Yeah, and obliviousness often ends up in the best results, right? There's a piece on Peter Laughner in the first edition, and he's a great example of somebody whose recordings you almost feel would have been ruined by high fidelity and professionalism. Like there's that track Baudelaire, and it's got like some weird clacking sound going on in the background, and it totally enhances the song by kind of almost completely ruining it in the eyes of a professional, maybe. And that's kind of what we dig about it, though, right?
I was going to say, like, that's why the "You Are Doing Nothing Wrong" to me is so important, because most of the records that we all love, and most of the records that we love are based on, are people doing things wrong, and like, to me, misusing equipment, not reading the manual, like figuring out what something does, plugging this into that where it's not supposed to go. And I just feel like with what Donovan's talking about with these YouTube videos and the Reddits and stuff, it's like the ultimate goal is you want it to sound like everything else.
Right.
Like you have to EQ the drums like this, like this kilohertz level. Don't ever scoop this mid. And it's just like the ultimate goal is that, like, what kind of success is that if it's just going to sound like everything else? So it's like, I think the music that a lot of, I don't want to speak for everybody here, but I feel like a lot of the music that we've built our own music on is based on, like, what if I did this, And
I think that happens even at, like, the absolute kind of, or it used to happen even at the absolute kind of mainstream level. Like if you think about even like the Beatles, like, there's that the drum recording on Tomorrow Never Knows is apparently the first time that a bass drum was ever condensed to such a degree, and that it kind of got that kind of whack sound. And that's, that's just through pure experimentation. And that's something that just used to happen, right?
Well, I didn't know that.
Apparently, I heard that. I can't remember where I heard that, but I heard that recently. All right, so you want to walk us through some of the other people that you talked to in issue 1?
Ben?
Who did I talk to? I don't know. Did I talk to anybody in
Kristen?
Oh yeah, I talked to Kristen Gallerno. She's an amazing sound artist who also is in charge of the Henry Ford Museum in Detroit. It's sort of a museum of technology, and she kind of deals with something that she calls the sonic specter. She came out with a book called High Static Deadline. So I wanted to interview her further about this idea of the sonic specter, which is just sort of this almost after effect of a particular event that happens that often has a weird or eerie sort of effect. So yeah, we kind of talked about, that's what I interviewed her most about. And then I guess I kind of I was the go-between to have our friend David do the Peter Loeffner article as well, because I knew David. David wrote a book called Feeding Back, that's conversations with guitar players. So I knew him through that, and so he kind of did that Peter Loeffner article. Those were the two that I did.
And you were also involved with Elise on the piece of Naomi as well, right?
That's right. We also interviewed Naomi, and that was a lot of fun, because I don't think people had asked her about her bass playing or like tone or anything like that. So that was sort of an idea behind it as well, is talk to people who should be talked to. I'm sure a million people want to know, hey, what's up with that bass tone on Galaxy 500, And then, yeah, I mean, I think it had effect. I mean, next thing you know, after that, then they start getting reissued by Silver Current and stuff. So I think we had a pretty big effect on the world with interviewing Naomi.
And then, James, you obviously talked to Matt Valentine.
Yeah, our mutual friend, hero of mine. And I really want to, I mean, I've interviewed him before and obviously spent a lot of time talking to him over the years, but I really wanted to get into the technical stuff, because I know what a tinkerer and what a sort of like recording sort of maverick he is. And, what Donovan was saying earlier about how he would always print effects to tape, that was one of the things that MV was talking about too, is committing. I don't do that. I think that's a very bold, Nick, I'd rather, because otherwise you have to just redo it. And I said to MV, like, well, what happens if you put flange and wah on something and then he's like, oh, I just redo it. It's like, okay, well, the simplest answer is best, but that was really fun. I liked getting inside of his brain a little bit for that.
When did you all kind of decide? When did you first decide? At what point in your lives did you decide that you were drawn to music that was, decidedly unorthodox in terms of the recording?
I mean, for me, and I like relatively mainstream recordings as well, but probably the big change for me came when I heard I saw The Fall on this MTV program from the Friends Experiment. And I was already kind of writing songs. I don't know how old I was, like 16 or something. And I've been writing songs for a few years. But just how kind of audacious his vocals are, kind of really made me think, like, that I could get into recording. And then the next album that really kind of, set a path for me was Julius Caesar by Smog. And that was probably the thing that I'm still doing, decades later, which, you could see in that recording all the inventiveness that you would hear about, in these hushed tones about Brian Wilson and the Beatles or whoever. But it was, on a tape machine, and it was just using his own musicianship, which wasn't as robust in the professional sense as those guys. And that's probably what set me on my path.
Ben?
Well, probably the record that when I heard, I thought, oh, you can do that, is probably like Guided by Voices, recording on a 4-track when their music was coming out, and it was just as big as any of the other indie stuff, but it was obviously on a 4-track. And then it's the first time I thought, oh, you can just do a record on a 4-track, but like a band record, it was like really weird for me. So that probably, and also Julius Caesar, as far as like home recording and then deciding, oh, I could do what I do. It was definitely like early Smog Records and Julius Caesar as well. Probably like, oh, I can just set up this, tape machine. Mm-hmm. This 4-track probably, and then eventually that leads to like Dead Sea and stuff, and how,
right.
degraded the recording quality was, but how amazing it sounded. So that led into that stuff. But certainly, for sure, when I was more listening to indie stuff, like as a kid, as a teenager, you know.
I remember being really blown away when I heard a Skullflower 7-inch called White Fang, and it was like 94-ish, and it must have been recorded on a Walkman, and I was just like, oh,
Was
you
that on
can do
Sympathy?
this.
Was that one of them that was on Sympathy?
It was on Freak.
Oh, it was on Freak. Okay. The 2 7-inches that they put out on Sympathy for the record industry were so good. I remember, but I think those are a little more high fidelity. I don't think I heard the one that you're talking about.
The White Fang one is just like complete dirt, and I remember being like, oh, you can actually commit this stuff to vinyl.
Yeah.
Like this is insane, you know. And it kind of opened up a whole world for me, mental.
Yeah.
James.
Well, I mean, we're all about the same age, so yeah, those Guided by Voices and early Smog records made an impression on me too. But we're talking about the aesthetic of it, but for me, the other aspect of it was the independence aspect of it. Like, I was fortunate enough to grow up, like I was exposed to unorthodox music really early, like metal and punk and the whole DIY thing. But for me, like, I didn't think about how it sounded. It was more just like the Desperate Bicycles, you know, it was easy, it was cheap, go and do it. You know, like the punk rock approach, like, so more than just the sound of it, I was just like, we can do this ourselves. You know, one of my major sort of crusades is that when I was growing up, and maybe it was this way for you guys too, I don't remember anybody talking about production unless they worked in a studio, or like nobody, we were all listening to Slayer, listening to Ice Cube, whatever it was. No one was like the production. And then at some point it became this major point, like you had to address the production on a record. And I don't remember that even happening until like the mid to late 90s. So it's just something I never really thought about. It was more like what Ben was saying about just like, oh, you can just buy a 414 or 424 and make a record. And obviously there were a lot of people doing that. And that was really inspiring, but I never really thought about like, it sounds better. Like I like the tape saturation or this or that. It was more just like, this is an easy and cheap way to do this. You know?
Do you think it happened more in the mid 90s when that was just right after there were so many indie bands and Nirvana and everybody who had small recording budgets that all of a sudden, so you could hear the difference in those recording budgets and exactly what they sounded like?
Yeah, I think that's a good point where suddenly, because that Nirvana was probably one of the first bands where when Nevermind came out, it was like, oh, it sounds slick, you know, and I was probably 13 or 14 when Nevermind came out. I don't really have no idea what that meant, you know. Now I know what people meant by that, but yeah, it was almost like something that just really wasn't discussed before. So it's always interesting for me to hear people talk about production now as if that makes or breaks a record. Like I
never really heard the difference between, you know, production styles as a kid either, because I was into punk from a really young age too, and you know, I never heard the difference between like the Exploited and Nevermind. You know what I mean? Right. until I was much older, you know.
Totally.
Like, oh, now I get it. Yeah.
I will say with acoustic music, I do tend to shy away from overly produced acoustic music, though. Like if it has a really sweet reverb and stuff. So even when I was younger, getting into fingerstyle, I don't know. That's why I never actually got into you know, what's the Windham Hill, stuff like that. It was just a little too I mean, when I was learning fingerstyle, I was trying to gather as many different guitar players as possible. So I bought all this stuff, and the Windham Hill stuff just kind of, which was interesting. Recently, they've had such a comeback with people really loving it, you know. But so for me, yeah, I don't know. It was always, I don't know if that was the influence of Smog and those sort of like bands, and also listening to the Nick Drake Tanworth and Arden, one of the first Nick Drake bootlegs that came out. It was so lo-fi, but it sounds so great with acoustic guitar. So I think that might have had something to do with it too. And it was just really hard for me to listen to acoustic that was super, super slick.
Yeah, I think I felt the same way around, you know, kind of early 90s, like 92, 93. I was listening to like Lou Barlow solo records and solo tapes. There's Centrido, as I believe it's supposed to be pronounced. And, you know, and that was the same thing. If I remember my brother was like way into Grateful Dead, and I was unable to, and he was really into Dylan, and I was really unable to listen to those two things at that point because I was so immersed in listening to low fidelity recordings of acoustic guitars.
Yeah.
I think, I've never thought about this until James, you brought this up, but, my father was a musician and had been in studios and stuff. Some of the time was mostly a live act, but I can't remember a time where I wasn't aware of production. Maybe because of that, because I remember he had these big 2-inch reels in the closet, since I was a kid. And he would also have like a 4-track at home, but that was just more for like demos and that type of thing. I mean, I didn't have any profound thoughts on it at a young age. And I wasn't ever like, a studio hound. I didn't think about it in serious terms, but I was aware of it. And, I was actually recently thinking about Nevermind. I don't think about Nirvana that often, but it was certainly huge when I was young, the idea of that being slick, which I know what they mean, and I suppose it is slick. But then and I love Albini, but I was listening to that record and I was like, is this somehow more raw or cooler than Nevermind? I mean, to me, I was like, it has maybe more chorus on the guitar or something. Like it's such a small difference, but it was probably the first time I'd really thought about this idea of like, something having integrity because of the way it was recorded, which in some ways can get a little silly, I think. I think it's good to be like, hey, like you can do anything you want. But I think, the era we grew up in, the thing that I don't really like is like, if you don't record in some crazy goddamn way, you're a sellout. You're just basically a corporate shill. That doesn't make sense either,
I think part of it's chasing a memory, like that first time, like where you hear like kind of crappy recordings that are like, crappy recordings that really hit hard. And I think part of the pursuit of that as you get older is kind of maybe chasing that memory of that kind of visceral thrill you got when you were younger. I don't know, but maybe for me.
Production. Oh, go ahead.
You.
I was going to say a better production can make a better record now too, though. I mean, if it just depends on the music. Like if you think about something like the band Sun, it's like Monoliths and Dimensions. Randall Dunn's work on that makes that record. You couldn't do a lo-fi version of that. It would not have the same impact as. So that's another thing is in no way we're coming from one aspect of being musicians, recording ourselves. That's one part, but it's not putting down the skill and the art of certain engineers or producers. That's a really good example. The skill that Randall Dunn has when he's producing a record is something that can elevate it to a point where it can't be. That's a good example. That Sun record,
Absolutely. And have there been any kind of recording techniques that have come up in conversations with people that you've been having for the magazine, where you've kind of discovered new ways of doing things that you would never have thought of yourselves?
Well, thanks to Matt Valentine, now I'm going to start recording my 808 in a chicken coop.
Yeah, we've had a lot. I mean, not even just interviews. Like we have regular meetings. We have Zine meetings on Zoom just like this, and we are constantly talking about that stuff. It just comes up, and sharing ideas and tips and miking techniques and plugins now and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a great, it's a vernacular we all have. We have this vocabulary that we can just share these things, and that's part of the spirit of the zine is like sharing what and learning from others.
Yeah. So it's kind of a public nerd out, the zine, really.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we were kind of talking about production earlier. It's not necessarily a lo-fi or like lo-fi versus hi-fi aesthetic, but I think it's a personalized aesthetic versus. So, recently I was in Los Angeles with a friend, and he said, well, let's go visit so-and-so. Let's go check out their studio. They've just built a studio. And it was a musician. And we went, and yeah, it was an amazing studio. Beautiful. So much gear. Incredible. But it just left me a little cold. Like it was just for 1 minute, unless they were going to really record a lot of other bands, I guess that's cool. But it wasn't that, it just left me cold. And then when I see like David Pajo studio. He's done a thing on Earthquaker devices where they go through, and it was so inspiring. He has a studio. It's perfect for him. It does for his music. Very, he has just the little bit of equipment that he wants for him for his sound. And to me, those are the most inspiring studios that musicians have, when they not tons and tons of stuff, but just perfectly sort of curated for what they want to do. So I'm actually hoping we can interview Pajo at some point about a studio, actually.
Nice. And sometimes it's just about the room, right, as well. I mean, I remember in Manchester there was a BBC studio that closed down, and they'd given it to a bunch of musicians to promote shows, to just book their own shows there and promote shows. I saw Simon Joyner play there, and it was the most beautiful sounding room I've ever heard. It was completely dead sounding, and it was that was a moment I realized I really like a dead sounding room. Was when it was like heavily carpeted, and I remember, and I just remember feeling like it was the most immersive sounding room, and that was obviously it was a BBC studio, so it's going to sound good. But yeah, I think I'm not really suggesting that it's a low fidelity obsession. It's just, but I think we're still hanging on this idea of nothing is wrong with your mix, the tagline of the zine, which I really like that, because I think it really opens up the idea of record however you want, and whatever you.
And Simon, I'm sorry. And I talked to Simon Joyner on the upcoming issue. It was my interview. Is one of my favorites. But Songs for the New Year, it makes me. Well, that's not a dead sounding record at all. But that was another one that gave me one of those kind of, I don't know, kind of production dreams, because everything sounds. So I still can't totally break it down. And it's also partly, the way people play and all these kind of things. But that's one of those records that it's not even that lo-fi. I guess it's what they call mid-fi, but really kind of informed my sensibilities. But also, there's an article we have coming up in the next one called Atmospheres and Moods. And it's both on how you get a mood or an atmosphere in the music itself, but also the atmosphere and moods of studios. And I think that's a big part of what everybody chases, but also like what you want to feed in yourself, being a creative person in a studio, is you want to have that dream of a great environment that you're in. Like, I think it helps your the creativity, and it helps your kind of mental well-being in that space. And whether that's dreaming of Abbey Road or dreaming of like the crazy Link Ray Chicken Shack recording studio, you kind of want to keep that dream alive, I think, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And also I was thinking, as you were saying that, I was thinking one of the big aspects of fidelity and what kind of defines fidelity on a lot of records, if the record has them, is kind of drum sound too. Like a drum sound can almost completely define the production quality of a record.
Yeah, definitely.
What made you decide to publish a print zine rather than, say, start a blog?
I think, Ben, I feel like you're the biggest driver of how we were going to release
these guys. They wanted to do a Substack, and I was like, I don't know about that. And Donovan's really getting into Substacks, and he was really trying to do that. And I thought, maybe we should do a zine. I don't know.
I wanted it to be a Google Glasses exclusive, personally.
I'm joking. From the very beginning, it started because the idea started with Donovan and I were talking years ago about how great the original Tape-Op was when it was a zine, and how cool that was. Tape-Op's still great, but we were remembering how inspiring it was. And then we were just talking about zines and how cool zines were. And that's how it started. We thought, wow, somebody should do that. Hey, maybe we should do that. And then we sat on the idea for a while. We didn't even talk about it that much, but just, hey, we should do that zine. And then I think we met up with James just to hang out. Maybe it was like a COVID hangout, just like, hey, we should catch up. And we brought it up. And that's when and with James in there, very motivated, getting things going. Hey, we should do this. And then we just started meeting. And so James is sort of the engine of everything. And yeah, that's kind of how it came about.
Yeah. And it feels like kind of you don't see so many zines around anymore, right? Either. So it feels like kind of a decisive move to, a grassroots kind of homegrown underground aesthetic. How complicit do you think digital culture is in the shift away? Is it kind of, what I'm asking is it tied in? Is the zine format tied into what you're actually talking about? Because I wonder if digital culture is in some way complicit in a shift away from experimental recording techniques.
So is the zine an analog of the analog?
Yeah.
I think it is. I never thought of that before, but even taking the motto of you're doing nothing wrong, there are probably people who would say, don't do a zine, do a Substack. Everybody's reading Substack. Like, you're doing this wrong. If you want people to read your Simon Joyner interview, you need to put it somewhere where everybody can see it at all times. So I never thought of that before, but I like that sort of full circle. We're doing this wrong. We're doing a paper zine like like Muckraker or Maximum Rock and Roll or whatever, all these things we grew up reading. So yeah, I like that idea. I don't think it's like a defiant, like oppositional thing. I mean, we all consume digital media one way or another, like whether it's YouTube or, websites that we like, The Onion, whatever it is. So I don't think it wasn't really like a negative thing. It wasn't like an opposition. It was just like one of those is something as simple and cliche as be the change you want to see in the world. I think we were all thinking, like, wouldn't it be cool to like open up a zine while you're sitting somewhere and go back and reference it, maybe underline something, maybe highlight a record that someone talks about, like we all have done. You can't really do that. As somebody who's written a lot of essays and articles online, like half of them are gone. There's just no footprint. They don't exist. And, that's going to keep happening. So I think having something, I still have old issues of The Source, like the hip hop magazine, The Source. I have old Wire issues of The Wire. And occasionally I'll be like, oh, this Wolfgang Voigt article, I don't remember that. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, and I think that that's something that feeds into it too. This idea of the tactile, which is maybe, again, a very obvious thing to say, but just having things, that we can look at and not have to be online to do it.
And we're not cutting ourselves off from future digital. Who knows what's going to happen? I mean, everything is possible. So and like James says, it's not in opposition, but besides tape op, there were just other zines that we really like. For instance, like Halana magazine was so big for me. Yeah. James sent me these because I was like, I miss my Halana magazines. And they're so amazing to look through and go through. And Muckraker was a big one. And actually Patrick ordered a copy. So it was very exciting that we got to send Patrick a copies because Muckraker was so big for me.
Yeah, that was gonna be the question I asked you next. Actually, what were the big zines for all of you? I mean, you mentioned a couple.
Yeah, and obviously Forced Exposure was probably the biggest for me, but
Terrascope was really big for me.
That as well. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Musically, I mean, in terms of
how easy was Terrascope to get over there? How easy was Terrascope to get?
It's around.
Yeah.
If you're in San Francisco, like Aquarius Records would have it, right? Like I would kind of order it, but yeah.
You could even get it at like Tower Records in New York. I remember I would see it. Like it was around. I mean, back when there were a lot of record stores and cool places to buy things like that.
Also, shout out to Phil. He was the first one to ever interview me or be interested in like what I was doing. So
same with me. Yeah. And I think that, Ben referenced it earlier, but those first few editions of Tape Op, where they talk to, the Chills and East River Pipe and all those kind of things were a big deal. Just because it was, earlier when we were talking about, I didn't even really think about production. Like before Tape Op, I never thought like anyone would ask any of those people how they did their albums. So it was a total mystery. And just to be like, East River Pipe being like, I record on a 388 in my apartment building, and I use a drum machine or whatever, and you're like, oh, okay. Like, it just starts to make it real and possible when somebody just walks you through this, very basic thing.
And K-pop had their own "you're not doing anything wrong" moments. I remember reading an interview with Stefan. I don't know his name. Stefan, and he was talking about how he mixed all his records on headphones. And I remember thinking, "Whoa, that's crazy!" Even though people do that, But at that time, I didn't know you can mix on headphones. So it's definitely had its own moments as well. And Donovan has the first issue of K-pop. He's got the first, or is it one or two? But
I have the first 3 or 4 issues.
Yeah, and it was their opening statement was so awesome. We kind of toyed around with the idea of taking their opening statement and just putting it as ours. It's kind of like, being a little cheeky, but who would have read that first one? It would have been, because it really matched what we were doing, what we want to do as well.
Yeah, I really like that there is this curatorial aspect to print zines too that you don't kind of get in the same. That it feels the internet is so vast, and a zine is so it's your taste kind of defined for a bunch of people who may or may not agree with all of it, but may find something out that they didn't know about.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the history of zines even beyond music. Do you guys remember that zine Slice Harvester? Mm-hmm. It was a papers stapled together zine by this guy who went to every pizzeria in New York. And obviously, Slice Harvester is a reference to Dune, which is awesome already. But just things like that, these little niche things, and obviously a lot of politics. Were also when I was a kid, reading Punk Planet and Heart Attack. A lot of that stuff taught me a lot about the world beyond where I grew up on Staten Island. So those niche things. Now it's even a music website will have to accommodate a wider group of people, and whether that's good or bad is not the point. But you can't just have a free jazz music website and expect to make a living. So you throw Ariana Grande in there, and that's cool, whatever. But you don't have to really do that when you're doing your own zine. So I think that's true.
It's funny you mentioned that because my friend Tim, I believe James, he's plays drums in a band he plays guitar in a band rather called Heavy Sentence, and he made a zine about the best public toilets in Manchester. Oh my God. It was a guide to where it was actually safe to go.
It's one of those things you laugh at and you're like, wow, that's probably really useful. Actually.
Yeah. Well, but also I feel like when we're talking about things not being, it being the way people record or produce their music being specific to them and not being about hi-fi or lo-fi, you could say that 4-track aesthetic is kind of baked into what Guided by Voices does or whatever. I think it's a similar thing with doing a zine, doing a paper zine. For us is we have something to say in that format. I mean, I'm sure part of it's our experience and our age, when we grew up, but it's also, there's a specific are specific, but, intangible, if that makes sense, thing that you can do in a zine that wouldn't come across in the same way in a digital version of that. And I think that, we feel comfortable in that space. So it made sense for us to do it.
For sure.
I wanted to ask about the print run. I know you did 2 runs in total and they all sold out, but how many do you print?
3. I think we ended up doing 3.
We did 3 plus a special run for the UK because it was cheaper to have that just printed over there and go directly to our distributor for it over there.
So I know I saw on the website that it's available in Rough Trade. Do you have any other distribution elsewhere?
No, we're just doing the UK. We have Simon up for it, and he just takes it. So we print at a place that also has a printer in the UK. We just kind of had to change the format just a tiny bit. But the United States format, we decided we were inspired by that to do the perfect bound instead of stapled. So future, they're all, even the United States ones will be perfect bound.
Nice. So you're taking a proper run at this thing. You have a website and you have merch and stuff. What are you hoping to achieve from it? Is it just a dent in the wall of digital noise, or is it an expression of I don't know, Luddite fantasy, or are you hoping it's going to have an impact in terms of other people starting making zines again?
No,
there was that. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, please.
There's, I think, a Franz Kafka story about somebody that's working on a railroad that's been abandoned for decades. And that's what I thought this was going to be like. I was thinking we would put out this zine that like 3 people would heard of, and we would continue to have meetings and endlessly plan and talk about the zine and continue to put it out unburdened by a modest success. We're all surprised that it sold out. I mean, we didn't do huge runs, and I think what we're trying to do is put something that has a little bit of meaning and depth out there, and what that means in terms of it being a business. It means that it will suffer because of that, but hopefully it will inspire some folks.
What has Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, most of all, we're driven to talk to people who we want to know things about. I want to know this about this person and then we just figure if we're interested in it, hopefully other people are too.
Yeah. What has the response been like? Are you hoping it's going to have some kind of impact beyond just the heads?
I mean, I think it has in a lot of, I mean, like Donovan said, like it exceeded our expectations. Like, of course, just like when you make a record, the inevitable conversation is like, what if like 6 people buy this and we're sitting on these for years, But just the fact that it got, like, the zine got press, places like Aquarium Drunkard and stuff like that. And we've had a lot of people reach out to us, offer to write articles and interview people. Like, we actually have a backlog of stuff now just because people want to contribute. And I think doing the first one is important because then it shows people that it's real. Because, I mean, Donovan and Ben and James have this fantasy of doing a zine. But then suddenly it's like it's in your mailbox. It's like, I want to be part of this, So I think it just operates like we all have with labels and records, just kind of trying to build a sort of cottage industry and get people interested. And obviously we want to snowball. We want it to be, more successful every time. But I'm really happy with everything we've done so far. I feel really good about it.
How easy has it been to do?
Not that easy.
It's mostly time, just as nobody has as much time as they did when they were younger. You find you have so much stuff to do. So that's the most difficult thing is to all of us, just finding time to get together and to do it. But there's definitely been a learning curve with doing a published zine and how things work, but it's not too different than we're using music distributors to get it out, for the most part. So, it's been actually pretty fun to learn this stuff.
We should credit Ben, though, because Ben basically learned how to do this for the zine. Ben had never done like major layout projects before, never like looked into where to publish, like, shipping, the sort of the 11th hour crunch time stuff was Ben. I think we should give him props for that because, that's a lot of hard work that everybody here knows I'm not capable of doing. So.
It was a lot more complaining than hard work, which made those guys think it was a lot of hard work. So I'm glad
that's your secret. I
think that's most work, right? I think that most people make themselves sound busier than they really are. Do you think that doing this scene is going to affect your own approaches to recording in any kind of way?
I feel like it's already had a bit of an effect on me and just making me more aware or mindful of what I'm doing, and also to maybe indulge myself more because there's a real diverse crew of people we've talked to and interviewed for the zine, but everyone has in common this ideal that they're striving for, or this thing that they want to do in recording. And I think that since we've done the zine, when I've gone into my home studio, I think about that a lot more. Like, why do you want to be here? Like, no one's forcing you. In fact, people would maybe prefer that you spend less time in the studio. And I go, what exactly am I doing? Why am I doing this? And trying to, because, as you gain experience and grow older, you inevitably lose sight of that a bit, and a little bit of fog goes in, and you're just like, well, this is just what I do. And you lose a little bit of that magic that way. So the zines rekindled some former passions for me.
So it's making you more deliberate.
Yeah, deliberate, and like I said, maybe more mindful. Just like, all right, here I am. Like, let me mess around with this drum machine. What if I, recorded the bass in a certain way, or if I'm not really, if something, I'm not happy with it in some certain way, just being, more inspired to do something that,
like putting a drum machine in a chicken coop.
The drum machine and the chicken coop. But yeah, just taking a moment to look at yourself and what you're doing, and understand that it's a very, it can be a very meaningful experience if you make it that way.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what's coming up in issue 2, or you want to keep it a surprise?
That'd be perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Think up
and maybe we could, it doesn't have to be a big, I have a very large article with Tim Green that I did that was originally going to be in the first one, but the first one was already big. So we moved it to number 2, and talking about recording, basically starting in DC and really great. And then all the way to Olympia and San Francisco. I mean, he has such a great arc. Usually we're not going to be interviewing actual engineers. We're kind of more interested in musicians who record themselves in general, but Tim being in Nation of Ulysses and the Champs, they go hand in hand with him. So I was kind of excited about that.
Nice.
And we have a Mark Morgan guitar interview. That's really fantastic. And the aforementioned Simon Joyner interview, which is a deep dive, really great. We have Meg Baird and Charlie did that's my favorite piece in the new issue. Actually, I'll leave that one to be a surprise, but it's really beautiful. And it's a little bit of a curveball for us, which I really like. And then there's some op-ed type essays. Donovan and I worked on a few of those, and we have our first poll, which is really exciting. This should appeal to you too, Nick. Like we were talking about studio jargon and how you go in a studio and you hear something like, I don't know, that sounds kind of boxy, or I kind of want that to be a little warmer. And like, what do these words actually mean? So we talked to a group of engineer and producer friends of ours, including Larry Crane of Tape Op fame, who's been super supportive, by the way. We should mention, I mean, I've written a few things for Tape Op, and we're all fans of Tape Op. And Larry, I believe, bought the first issue, or maybe we sent him one, but and then he agreed to be part of this poll. But anyway, that's really exciting too. And we're hoping to do more of that sort of thing too. And we're hoping that we can transfer that over to the Discord too. Like when people read it and then they go to the Head Voice Discord page, we can continue that debate, because the answers vary widely. I mean, it's pretty fascinating to see.
Can I just tell you a story? I spent many years living in Manchester, and I once heard a story about Ian Brown from the Stone Roses in a studio, and he completely befuddled the engineer by saying to him, I want it to sound right, like I've got one foot in the water and one hand on the sand.
Wasn't there the famous Grateful Dead story where like one of the engineers walked out because Bobby was like, I want it to sound like the air. And they were like, that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, I'm mad.
I can't wait to read it. I can't wait to
a little less abstract, but one of my favorite stories like that is when Tyrannosaurus Rex was recording, and he told the engineer that he had to read the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy before you could mix the record to really get the sound.
Oh wow, that's amazing. So it sounds like it's going to be a bigger issue, this one, than the first one.
Maybe
page count, but we're trying to keep it the same.
Yeah. And we already have issue 3. Like we have ideas for issue 3, and I'm hoping we can follow up a little quicker. But like Ben said, like between touring and real life stuff, I mean, we're all just crazy busy with stuff. But there's a reason we don't have the spring issue or the November issue. There's a reason we did that, and it was more just because we want to do it at our own pace, so that we're not rushing something out and that nobody feels like this weird like 9 to 5 crunch about it. But at the same time, like we do have goals to keep it going and keep the ball in the air is probably a good way to put it. So like while Ben's on tour, me and Donovan will have a meeting and talk about it. And then when I'm somewhere, they'll talk about it and vice, like we'll just try to always keep something happening with it so we can continue to do it as long as people are reading it and buying it.
I hope you can keep it going. It kind of heartens me to see things like this happening. And like I was thinking about Galactic Zoo Dossier. It's still out there whenever it comes out. You just know whenever you don't know when it's going to drop. Still printing every now and then. And I feel like this could be one of those other kind of sought out gems. Well, it's definitely a great salve to the endless doom scrolling, and there's a lot more that I feel I'm gonna get from this. So I'm really psyched that you're doing it. So keep up the great work, and thank you for taking the time.
Thanks so much for having us.
All right, take care, all.
What a great first conversation for the podcast. Thanks so much to the Head Voice team for easing me into this thing so perfectly. You can find out more about Head Voice Zine at their website, which is at head-voice.com. Don't forget to subscribe to NQRA here on YouTube. Also, please do head over to our website at nqra.live for an ever-growing archive of audio programming from all corners of the global musical underground. We've got a show from Jennifer Herrimer from Royal Trucks and Black Bananas. We've got Jeffrey Alexander from Direwolves and Heavy Litters hosting a show. We've got Scott McDowell, ex of MTV and WFMU. Yeah, just tons of great programming that's growing every day. See the link in the description below if you'd like to sign up as a supporter and help us to keep the NQRA channel growing and thriving. And thanks so much for listening.